HarperCollins and HarperAudio present A Kidnapped West, The Tragedy of Central Europe by Milan Kundera. Translated from the French by Linda Asher and Edmund White. Read by Charles Constant. The Literature of Small Nations. Presentation by Jacques Rupnich. Milan Kundera, Address to the Czech Writers' Congress, 1967. Some writers' congresses are more significant, or anyhow more memorable, than the parties. In communist Czechoslovakia, these events were frequent and much alike. Writers' conferences could also be unpredictable, and sometimes could even signal profound changes in the relations between the government and the society. Some speeches mark an era, and reading them again today has a special resonance. One such speech is Solzhenitsyn's denunciation of censorship in Moscow in May 1967, which inspired Guy Bert's fine song, La Vérité. The poet has spoken the truth. He must be executed. Less well-known are the startling speeches delivered in Prague a month later at this Writers' Congress, beginning with the one by Milan Kundera. Kundera was by then a prominent writer. In the theater with The Keeper of the Keys, 1962, with his story collection Laughable Loves, 1963, 1965, and above all with The Joke, published in 1967, the year of that Congress, a novel that both evoked an era and ended it. A book that remains, for Czech readers but not for Czechs only, linked to the Prague Spring of 1968. The translation of The Joke was published in France, Gallimard, the day after the Soviet invasion of Prague in October 1968. Kundera was teaching at the Prague Film School, FAMU, and had become one of the notable figures in a formidable burst of national cultural creativity. It was a time of exceptional originality and diversity in literature, Chabal, Dvorsky, Vaculík, in theater, Havel, Topol, and especially in film, the Czech New Wave with Forman, Menzel, Němec, Chytilova. With good reason, Kundera viewed the 1960s as a golden age of Czech culture, which was gradually shedding the ideological constraints of the government without suffering those of the marketplace. From that perspective, the Prague Spring of 1968 cannot be reduced to its political dimension and can only be understood as the culmination of a decade when the writer's magazine Literární noviny printed 250,000 copies a week and sold out on the first day. A decade in which the emancipation of the culture was speeding the dissolution of the political structure. Assessing the danger, the ruling power sought to take back control, and the Writers' Congress of June 1967 became the theater of the struggle between the writers and the regime. The premises of the conflict had been laid earlier, in the 1963 Liblice Symposium on Franz Kafka, a symbolic burial of socialist realism. The work of the Prague, German-speaking Jewish writer, starting with The Trial, reminded Czech readers 40 years later of another kind of realism, one that was quite disturbing to the current occupant of the Prague castle, the head of the Communist Party and of the state, Antonín Novotný. The 1967 Writers' Congress offered a number of high points. First, in his speech, the writer Pavel Kohout criticized the Soviet bloc's anti-Israel policy during the Six-Day War and then read out Solzhenitsyn's famous censorship letter. This was too much for Jerzy Hendrich, the party directorate's watchdog for ideological orthodoxy, who abruptly left the room and, as he passed behind the rostrum where Kundera, Prohaska, and Lustig were seated, hissed a memorable, "That's it. You've lost everything. Absolutely everything." The next day, Ludwig Vaculík, the author of The Axe and the editor of Literární noviny, took his turn. Seething over Hendrich's exclamation the day before, he violated all acceptable protocol and raised point-blank the basic issue: the confiscation of power by a handful of people who want to make all the decisions. He attacked the party's censorship and even the Constitution. The break was complete. Political history will, of course, preserve the explicit details of the writers' conflict with the government. The temporary defeat of the writers in the summer of 1967, then their victory, also temporary, in the spring of 1968. The
Sample complete. Ready to continue?